Jehoshaphat was a good man, but again, Jehoshaphat was not a perfect man. He was a real man with real flaws, and we are shown some of those flaws in this chapter. The first was that he allied himself with Ahab by marriage. That was a really foolish thing of him to do. Ahab, the king up north, the king of Israel, Ahab was an utterly evil king, perhaps the worst of the bunch. And so to get entangled with him in any way, it was the height of foolishness. A massacre among the line of David, among the princes of Judah, would eventually take place as a direct result of this alliance. It was a bad move to make. I will say this, though, by way of Jehoshaphat's defense. I think he might be a bit dim. I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that as a genuine observation of the text. Some people are, aren't they? You'll see what I mean towards the end of this chapter. Still, he did love the Lord, and here's how you know. Ahab tried to rope him into a war, and Jehoshaphat said, look, I'm willing to fight against the enemies of God's people, but, verse 4, first, let's seek the counsel of the Lord. So the king of Israel brought together the prophets, 400 men, and asked them, shall we go to war against Ramoth Gilead or not? Go, they answered, for God will give it into the king's hand. But Jehoshaphat asked, is there no longer a prophet of the Lord here, whom we can inquire of? Jehoshaphat doesn't much care what the mouthpiece of a false god has to say on this matter. He rightly says, I want to know what God has to say, so find a prophet of the Lord. The fact that there are so few prophets of Yahweh left in the territory of Israel tells you almost all you need to know about what's going on in that kingdom. The king can think of just one man, but says, I hate that guy because he never prophesies anything good about me, but always bad. Why do you think that prophet always prophesies bad things about that king? Well, because that king has set himself up in opposition to the living God and does have bad things headed his way. The prophet is being faithful. The prophet is telling the truth, but this evil king doesn't want to hear it. If this king would humble himself and turn from his sin, well, that prophet would change his tune. He would give him a different message, a message of good news. Upon Jehoshaphat's insistence, then, a prophet of the Lord is brought in. The messenger who had gone to summon him said, look, the other prophets, without exception, are predicting success for the king. Let your word agree with theirs and speak favourably. For goodness sake, toe the party line. Don't show the rest of us up. Don't cause trouble here. Scratch the man's itching ears, cash the paycheck and walk out of here, will you? Well, Micaiah, the prophet of the Lord, absolutely refuses to play along. Now, his first answer is clearly said in an overly sarcastic tone, and you know that it's clear because everyone in the scene understands that. That's the only way we can make sense of this back and forth here. So the king asks, shall we go to war against Ramoth Gilead or not? And the prophet replies, go ahead, sir. You're bound to win. But the king says, in effect, look, stop mucking around. Tell me what you really think. And so Micaiah answers, I saw all Israel scattered on the hills like sheep without a shepherd, which is code for, if you go to battle, king, you're going to die. Your people will be like sheep without a shepherd. Didn't I tell you he never prophesies anything good about me, but only bad? Well, yeah, you're right, king, but the bad news is a response to the choice you have made. Make a different choice and you'll hear different news, right? So the king charges headlong into battle. Now, I mentioned earlier that I think Jehoshaphat might be a little bit dim, and this is the second piece of evidence, not just that foolish alliance, but here in verse 29. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, I will enter the battle in disguise, but you wear your royal robes. So the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. This means, of course, that every enemy archer will turn his bow and train his eyes on the man wearing royal robes. He will draw an extraordinary amount of additional attack and opposition. Why he said yes to this is literally beyond me. But Ahab, for his part, thinks he's got the better of this situation. He is marching with his troops. He's going with them into battle. He is slipping in among the ranks, apparently unidentified by any of the opposition. It will take an act of God for Micaiah's prophecy against him to come true, right? And in verse 33, that is exactly what happens. Someone drew his bow at random and hit the king of Israel between the breastplate and the scale armor. a random person blasted a random shot into the air and it randomly landed within the gap of a couple of millimeters that could legitimately lead to the death of the king. What a surprise, then, at the end of it all, that despite all human expectations, despite this king's best efforts, the word of the Lord did prevail, and the judgment did land upon him after all. You can disagree with God, you can deny the truth of what he has said, but it does not change the fact that God is God, and his word will come to pass. This king went to extraordinary lengths to try to avoid death. The simple and effective way would have been to repent of his sins, ask the living God to save him, and then know with certainty that whenever the day comes for him to close his eyes in death, he will instantly open them on the other side to enjoy everlasting life.